Hello everybody and welcome to more ITCHIO horror games. We're here to play a bunch of ITCHIO horror games because a lot of stuff is different and we have a lot of experimenting to do with the channel, with editing, with recording and all that because this is a different space and a different setup kind of. I mean it's the same room but everything's moved around. We got a new setup for the mic and all that, so it's going to be a little bit weird for a bit, but we're going to get used to it and the editing will eventually kind of stable out and be regular. But until then, we're gonna just jump right into this. This one caught my attention because of the name. The name is fucking insane. The name is My Father's Long Legs. I don't know what kind of psychopath name that is, but I'm excited to find out. Let's see what happens. My Father's Long Legs. Okay, my family lived on the southwest edge of a certain midwestern industrial city in an old house, old enough that its basement still has a dirt floor. Okay, well, that doesn't mean... Okay. Dirt floor? I was not old enough to openly question a parent's behavior, but certainly old enough to recognize its oddness when my father began digging. Is this going to be a whole, like, this is it? I retain only a single memory of the time before the situation became alarming, and my father forsook sunlight forever. Alright, well, apparently this is a full-on word game, so we're doing podcast style. Be prepared for some creepcast shit. I retain... That's the same line we just read. I'm sitting at the bottom of the wooden stairs that led down to our basement. Ahead, in the dimness, stands my father, up to his waist in the hole. Okay. Still in his dark blue uniform from the factory, skin and fabric blackened by the hot breath of machinery and further smudged now by the damp earth. Okay. I watch further with father. I watch father with the satisfaction of a child who sees in her parent a well of limitless capacity. Upstairs, my mother called out that dinner is done. My father takes one last shovel of earth, turns it over the side of the excavation, and, in a single incredible motion, crawls out of the hole, seemingly by pressing the sole of his boot on the lip of the pit and moving his whole body upward, walking right past me, right up the stairs. Is this the whole game? Wow, okay. You know what? I'm gonna just embrace it. I'm gonna embrace it. Full podcast mode. He was always a tall, angular man, as the remaining pictures of him suggest. And to this day, I can clearly conjure the marvelous image of my father's long legs, striding over me as he emerged from the hole. He was to spend years digging beneath our house, okay? Apart from him, there were three of us. My mother, my younger brother, and myself. Ooh, we get to choose. What about myself? A year or so before we left, my father was the last time I ventured down into the basement. That's like, okay, that's kind of cool. We get to choose paths. My brother was out with friends, having reached the age when he finally realized that awkwardness that resulted from bringing visitors to our home, and mother had locked the door to her room and apparently gone to bed. Father was, of course, laboring in the basement, and I was doing homework in the living room while watching television. There came a knock at the door. The man on the porch was squat, but dressed neatly in a suit, coat, and hat. A pair of very small spectacles was perched on the end of his nose, looking masculine in comparison to his large, round face. "Hello, young lady," he said to me in a labored voice. "Is your father home?" "Who are you?" I asked. The man tipped his old-fashioned hat back on his head, smiling with rubbery lips. "You would have no reason to know me, of course," he said. "But I'm your uncle." Okay. I left the man on the porch, the door locked, while I went to seek my mother's help. Thus I discovered she was unresponsive, as she often was in those days. What do you mean, unresponsive? Yeah, she was fucking knocked out cold, nothing. What am I gonna do about it? This left with only the option to summon my father from the basement. I had to go grab the candles and fire. And he did not respond when I opened the door and yelled down, though I thought I could hear him. Faintly. The sound of his digging. I looked back at the front door, where I could see through pebbled glass the rotund figure of the man who claimed to be my uncle, and descended the wooden stairs into the basement. The only light, as always, came from a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. My father had learned to operate in these conditions, but for me, the lack of illumination cast a labyrinth below into a mess of confusing and seemingly contradictory paths of damp black earth and only slightly blacker shadow. Father at first attempted to dig straight down, but as the years went on, he elaborated his original plans, angling outward from the center of the basement at the depth of perhaps 15 feet. From there, he had begun to hollow out the entirety of the basement with one long looping path, threaded and bent around itself like some monstrous length of viscera. Okay, all the while continuing his march downward. So it's like a spiral circle type thing he's got going on. Okay, I stood on the bottommost stair that, as I thought of it, still properly belonged to our house. By my feet was a stack of unfamiliar books. They were old, with blank but warped brown covers. Next to them was what appeared to be an antique child's rattle, caked with dirt and several rocks chipped into various unnatural but vaguely instrumental shapes. I turned to the void and called for my father. No response came, but I grew more certain that I could hear, however distantly, the sound of father's shoveling. Called for him again, this time giving also my purpose for interrupting his work. There's a man at the door, I said. He says he's my uncle. I stood and waited, and as I did so, the sound of digging stopped. Okay. This is kind of cool. Like, this is not what anyone would have expected going into an ITCHIO horror game, but you know what? I'm here for it. This is full Creepcast style, full-on podcast, and that's fine. My father emerged a minute or so later, unfolding himself from the narrow bends of his maze, his pale skin covered only by the rags of his clothing, and everywhere dusted gray with soil, including, I noted, the corners of his mouth, which seemed stained particularly thoroughly, and much more darkly. Okay. Your uncle, father rumbled, not quite asking a question. He then added, my brother. Okay. Show him in, he ordered. Oh. I kind of didn't expect him to let him in. I expected him to murder him at the door, but you know what? This is kind of interesting. I'm here for this. The squat stranger, my uncle, who I remembered smelled of sour milk, seemed elated at his prospects. Jesus Christ. I led him down the basement stairs, his agitation growing exponentially, until he saw my father standing at his full height. It must have been at least 8 or 9 feet then, I think, at the entrance of his renovations. Ew, so he's like a gross long guy? I knew to take my leave, and as I ascended the stairs, I heard the visitor remark that my father seemed to have done very well for himself, and all things considered. I never again saw the man who claimed to be my uncle, either that day or any other day. Perhaps not coincidentally. This is also my last clear memory of my father, and the one that returned to me many years later when my brother suggested we return to our father's house. My brother and mother had their own experiences in that house, ones which I can relate only partially. God damn. There are many things about my mother I do not understand. She first found my father attractive, she admitted to me many years later, because of how unusual he was. He had come to the Midwestern industrial town and secured a job at the same factory where my mother was working. Though a practical man, he read constantly and ferociously in subjects ranging from engine repair to philosophy, a habit instilled in him, he had claimed, by his own parents. So there's like the weird fucked up books at the top of the tunnel, those are his, and he's reading the books while digging? Is that what I'm getting? This was all my father ever said of his family beyond us. Any further inquiry into the subject caused him to leave the room, or bring up some other pressing issue. Mother once theorized that father had run away from his home. Whatever his reason for leaving his family behind, my father did not wait too long before beginning a new one. I was born only a few months after my parents were married. Within a few years, father made enough money that my mother could stay home and watch over me, and not too long after, my brother. Then one night, when my brother was perhaps only a year old, father came home, pulled a brand new shovel from the back of his pickup truck, and descended into the basement, where he began to dig. At first he told mother that he was preparing to put down a cement floor, suggesting a prelude to a full or partial renovation of the house. As a child, the movements of adults were still largely mysterious to me, and I do not know the specific circumstances under which mothers realized the motive was untrue. Nor do I know exactly what transpired when father told mother that they must go to the basement to discuss the matter closer to its source. For after the door shut behind them, my brother and I were left alone in the house. My brother cried most of the night while I lay in my own bed, pillows pressed to my ears. The next day, my mother reappeared, quietly prepared our meals, and then locked herself in the bedroom shortly after father returned home and commenced digging once again. What the fuck? Where is this story going? What is it? Is this about the? Is this? Is that what I think it meant? My father, for his part, stopped sleeping in the bedroom with her, instead taking to the basement, a decision which coincided with the first signs of his terrible metamorphosis. So wait, is he like becoming a bug man? The changes were slow but noticeable. Father began to grow paler, and by the time the factory closed and he could spend the whole day in the basement, he was as white as chalk. Perhaps it was this general evidence of wear, the change in skin tone and his subsequent emasculation, that made him look taller, as if his height increased in proportion to the depth of his project in the basement. Meanwhile, my mother put my brother into preschool and sent me to latchkey program while she worked to support us. In what seemed a deliberate contrast to my father, she grew somehow darker and smaller. My father dug uninterrupted in the basement for at least a decade, and once I started high school, he did not even leave the basement to join us for dinner. Then my mother left him. Father was sufficiently enveloped in his life's task that there was no need to replay the arguments from my childhood. Whatever desire he once had to keep us home with him had apparently fallen away, lost in the depths of the pit. Jesus. On her own, mother seemed to physically decompress, to become less bowed. She spoke more, laughed more. She had friends and lovers. We did not see my father at all after we left. Okay. So, they left this guy, and he's like already becoming basically a bug man. He's becoming a bug man, becoming super tall, more pale, more grotesque, just digging a hole forever. And these guys left him, basically said fuck you and left, which, I mean, I get it. I understand. But they're not gonna try to tell him like, hey, stop digging a hole forever. I mean, I guess she did have that big fight with him or whatever. That we don't actually know how bad it was just based off of the context. So, could be worse than I'm thinking right now. On the day we left for good, he did not even come out of the basement. Though by that point it was questionable how easily he could get through the doorway. So tall he had grown. It was not until many years later that my brother suggested we pay a return visit to our father's house. My brother had always been a bit more sentimental regarding the matter. My brother was young enough when my father began digging that it seemed to him an indifferent fact of life. It seemed obvious to me that something was wrong with our home. Its wrongness was screamed, I thought, by the chilly wait, what the fuck? Terseness? Okay. With which our mother moved through it. Returning home from work in the late afternoon, serving meals, and retiring to her bedroom. The wrongness was screamed, of course, by my father, who after losing his job at the factory spent nearly all day in the basement, emerging at irregular intervals to eat and to use the toilet. This is to say nothing of the physical changes he underwent as time went on. The wrongness was screamed by my own actions, the heavy worry I felt that at any moment the fragile equilibrium of our home would be upset at my brother's friends, and my brother's friends would witness the terrifying truth of our family situation, a situation I myself could not begin to articulate, but which I felt ashamedly that that an outsider would. Okay, holy shit. This is a straight up reading test, and my dyslexia is not helping. Of course, my brother, young as he was, saw nothing wrong with inviting his friends to our home, and even taking them down to the basement to see what he called, after our father's example, I believe, the renovations. The friends never asked to return to the basement after my brothers took them down there. Some of them quietly deigned to never return to our house at all. I think that might be a typo. Much to my relief, though my brother was often disappointed. I recall only one instance when my brother was perhaps 7, my bad, when one of his playmates made a scene. Jesus. After reading this much, I'm starting to bloody lose it, mate. I believe my brother's friend came from a religious family, which may have been part of the problem, but that may also be something I recognize only due to my own bias. At any rate, though his cosmology was different from my own, he at least shared some of my anxieties when he attempted to explain to my brother that our father's project in the basement was deeply unnatural. I emerged from the living room because down the hall I could hear crying. I knew that was my brother. He had a friend over, and so was prepared for the worst. The two boys stood outside the door to the basement, which still stood open. My brother looked up as I approached, at a loss as to how to comfort his weeping companion. "You're going to hell," our visitor informed me after I managed to get him to look at me. "That's where he's digging to down there," the child said, looking from me to my brother. "He's digging to hell and you're all going with him." Okay, I feel like that's a little, maybe not true. My brother did not invite as many classmates over after that day, and I don't believe he ever invited any of them down to see the renovations ever again. "Are we really going to hell?" he asked me one night, lying beside me in bed after a nightmare sent him to my room. I told him I did not know. "Is that where Dad is digging to?" he asked. I told him there was no such place. "Then why is Dad digging?" In the early days, when I sat at the stairs and watched him work, my father had given me dozens of flippant reasons for his project, seeking dinosaur bones, expanding the basement for spare bedroom or recreational space, looking for buried treasure, hoping to strike oil, suspecting a natural hot spring flowed beneath our house. All of these excuses has lost currency at this point, of course. And when I asked what he was doing, as my brother told me, his religious visitor had inquired, my father had other things to say. "This is not the real world," my father would say, or something along those lines. "What we think is the real world is just a layer of dirt caked around the true core of the universe." Okay, bro. And what is dirt? Inert matter? Dead weight? The remains of those who came and went before us? Content only to further press down upon creation with their waste. Jesus, dude. There was a time when human beings were giants, walking among a small earth. But now the earth has grown fat and hateful with our soil, while we have grown small. So this motherfucker thinks the world was like really small and we were just walking around on it. It's like 2 blocks. That's the world. Okay, bro. Starting here, I'm scraping away this sediment, our coagulated filth, and returning us to our original glory. I assembled this manifesto from memory, from various iterations and variations Father offered us over the years, and certainly it was the sort of heresy that had offended my brother's erstwhile friend. Jesus. Still, they were not satisfactory answers to us then, and would not be satisfactory for my brother as he huddled, fearing hell, in my bed. But frankly, I had no other answer for him, and let the matter lapse into silence. Which is perhaps why all those years later he urged me to come with him back to our father's house. You see, my brother wanted to put his mind at ease by checking up on our father, who had been left alone now for slightly longer than we had lived with him. On the one hand, I appreciated my brother's sentiment, even if I felt it misplaced. On the other hand, I knew I could not stop him. His feelings towards father had always been more lenient. The only question was, would I go alone with him? Let him make the visit on his own. Would I go along with him and make the visit on his own? Go along with him, of course. We decided upon a day to visit our childhood home, where we assumed our father still lived, and decided to meet there one afternoon the following week. But there must have somewhere been a miscommunication. Jesus Christ. It's getting to that point where, like, I'm having trouble even reading, like, basic-ass words. I was late. I must have been late. The alternative is that, for his own purposes, my brother arrived early to see our father before I did, and I did not wish to contemplate why that would be. The town was considerably less industrial than it had been, though the taste of industry still laced our water and air. The old neighborhood, not the most affluent even in former times, had fallen into further disrepair. The houses up and down the block stood weathered, and it seemed empty. The sidewalks buckled around thick, protrusions of sickly weeds. Jesus Christ, these descriptions are crazy. Which reached out into the potholed street, protruding fingers of the overgrown lawns. The only sign of habitation was a single car, my brother's car, parked outside our old home. The doors were locked, the windows rolled up. A hand pressed on the hood told me it was not warm. But apart from that, I had no way of guessing how long the vehicle had been there untended. Ahead, the house waited. Okay. It seemed not much different from the rest of the buildings, scraped down to gray bones by the elements. The windows were gone, without even slivers of glass remaining, and the porch had bowed and now held a stagnant pool of rainwater. The front door stood open at an angle, its lowermost hinge having rusted and snapped in two. Stepping carefully into the rotten porch, I slipped inside and found myself in the old living room. The floor was littered with trash and chunks of plaster dropped from the ceiling. The television was gone, though a lighter patch in the shredded wallpaper marked its former location. The couch had collapsed and now seemed covered with mounds of some sort of gray mold or fungus. Ahead was the central hallway of the house, and I could see that the door to the basement had been wholly removed. Jesus. So this is like getting so hard to read, I'm not gonna lie. I'm like focusing on reading this shit now because it's getting to that point. But that's okay though. I think so far I'm kind of really liking this. It's very different, not what I expected from an ITCHIO game, but I think it's pretty cool. I called out my brother's name and then stood for a moment, looking down into unremedying darkness. God damn. Of course the power was out. It was probably disconnected long ago, but a flashlight lay on the ground just outside the basement entrance. My brother's? The flashlight seemed quite new. I flicked it on and pointed it down into the basement, but it penetrated far enough only to reveal the foot of the stairs. I called my brother's name again and waited. There was still no response. Assuming the basement was anything like as I had last seen it, my brother could have easily gotten hurt if he went down without his flashlight. He might have been laying down just beyond the stairs, unconscious. I had to make sure. No, you didn't. Flashlight ready, I went into the basement. Ooh. Okay, this is actually kind of cool. I reached the bottom, and when my flashlight returned, only a slope heading deeper beneath the house. I knew my father had done quite a bit of work in the decades since we left. Okay, yep. I went down and called for my brother. I walked to the left, I walked to the right. Called. Only my own breathing echoed back through the chambers of barren earth. I walked further into the darkness. I called for my brother again. I turned right. The musty smell of old earth filled my nostrils. I turned right. I was going in circles. How would I even be able to tell? I took a downward slope path to the left, called my brother's name. I followed the sound of digging. The paths my father had eaten through the earth stretched out in all directions. There was no sign of my brother. I called for my brother again. I followed the sounds of digging. I turned right. The musty smell of old earth filled my nostrils. This is actually kind of cool. I like this. Around me there was nothing but darkness. I followed the sounds of digging. Was I going in circles? How would I even be able to tell? Downward slope path to the left. Follow the sounds of digging. I think I have to follow the sounds of digging a bunch. I walked further onward. I received no answer. I followed the sounds of digging. I'm just gonna keep following the sounds of digging. That's worked. It worked. Hey, yo. Okay. Okay. I see you. I know that song. That's that one song. I did not find my brother. I do not know what to tell our mother. I do not know where to go from here, what to do. It is true I gave up my search, but once I saw what lived there, had been living there for all these years, or more precisely, what had grown there, I ran from the basement. Somehow, by my own luck or by some other's design, I made it out of that darkness, though my brother has not. There's a chance, I think, that they may still be alive. My guilt is heavy, do not doubt that, but it is overweighed by the fear I experienced when I came face to face with that terrible result of Father's attempted renovations of the rotten world. I once told my brother there was no such place as hell. I still believe that to be true, but wherever my little brother is now. Ooh. Ooh. I like this. Ooh, what? Oh, whoa. I wonder if he's grown as tall as my father. Ew. Ewy. My father's long. Okay. A Twine game by Michael Lutz. Website, Twitter, script by Leon R. Knott. Everybody give him a round of applause. That was pretty cool. That was like actually doing like a Creepcast episode. And I know especially with my like dyslexia, it is hard to read properly for long periods of time. So when we do videos like this, towards the end, I tend to kind of lose it and kind of like lose my ability to read properly. But overall, this was really cool. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, check this out. This was originally going to be a 3 ITCHIO game video, but this feels like it should be its own thing because this one felt kind of special. So we're going to make this its own thing. And with that being said, I'm going to end the video here. Thank you again for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you want to see more stuff I've made, it should be appearing on screen now. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Peace out.